just in case it doesn't come up on the screen. Okay, 8, 6, 7. To Canaan's land I'm on my way, where the soul never dies. My darkest night will turn to day, where the soul never dies. There will be sad farewells, no tear dimmed eyes, where all is love and the soul never dies. We're dismissed to our classes.
Hello? Hello? Am I on? Hello? Can y'all hear me? No? Is that green or orange or yellow or blue? It's green. So then that's up to them. If you can't hear me, it's not my fault. Yeah. Some people just can't hear. All right. Oh. You know, technology is funny. You know, one of the most important things you can do with technology is save. So hopefully, I know that everything is where it should be, but it may not look the way that I last remember it. So that's fine. It doesn't really matter. All right, tonight we're going to be looking at, again, we're talking about worldviews, basically different ways of looking at things. And tonight we're going to be talking about individualism versus community. And I was telling Charles earlier this evening that if I wasn't so tired, I probably would have rewritten my whole lesson this morning. But I was tired, so I decided to just stick with what I had. Sometimes you come through a lesson and you like what you've got, but then you get to the end and you're like, I really wish I had gone somewhere different with it. And I usually give myself enough freedom that I may go there anyway. But anyway, so if I get off track, well, I'm off track. And that's not very unusual. So, who at some point in your life has thought that this phrase was from the Bible? God helps those who help themselves. I mean, I thought it was from the Bible, but it's not. I didn't look up where exactly it's from. I did at some point. It kind of has its history back to Greek stuff. At least some people put it that way. That this is just a phrase that's just been hung on to for a long time, that God's help those who help themselves, God helps those who, and in modern times it's become God helps those who help themselves. But why is it believable that that would be in the Bible? These are free questions. You can say whatever you want. Hmm? Because you said God? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm saying it just makes sense. You can't hit somebody that won't hit themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, and if people aren't willing to be active, I mean, in a sense, it just depends on what you mean by that, I guess. If you're, sometimes some people will not be helped, right? And that's unfortunate. But it almost seems like it might fit. What are some cultural proverbs or sayings that we have that reflect our culture rather than biblical values? What are some other proverbs that you might have, or just any proverbs that you have? Like, first thing that comes to your mind, like just some sort of saying that you might use as advice or something. I'll give you an example. Don't make a mountain out of a molehill. Right? That's actually good advice. Right? Don't make something big out of something that's not big, right? Every man for himself. What comes around goes around. You snooze, you lose. The older I get, the better I used to be. I went back and watched some of my old high school football games, and I remember them entirely different. I had a bigger role in them in my mind, than I actually did, I think. Anyway, any others? Don't count your chickens before they're hatched. The early bird gets a worm. Some of these are good, right? But there's a false story that underlies a lot of the stories that we tell, even superheroes. Like some of my favorite superheroes, in some point in their story, they say something that's just like, really? I don't think so. And a lot of things that underlie a lot of our stories that we really like lots of times have to do with following what? Follow your heart, right? Follow your heart. Well, here's some quotes that I found I thought were interesting. Let your heart guide you. It whispers, so listen closely. Walt Disney. If you follow your dreams, it means you follow your heart. If you do follow your heart, I don't think you can go wrong. Celine Dion. You have the right to follow your heart, Do what feels right for you. Mariah Irving. I think she's like some sort of self-help guru. You'll never find peace of mind until you listen to your heart. George Michael. And then this one, being a technology geek, I think is pretty rough. But it's from Steve Jobs. Remembering that you're going to die is the best way to avoid the trap of thinking that you have something to lose. If you're already naked, there's no reason not to follow your heart. What do these quotes reflect? What kind of attitudes do they reflect? Well, you may have some other comment. I'll ask a question again. Pull yourself up. Yeah. Yeah, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. It looks pretty silly. I was looking because I actually think one of the lessons has something to do with that. Maybe I looked that up. I almost got a picture of that. There's a whole bunch of pictures you can find of somebody trying to pull themselves by their own bootstraps. It looks kind of funny. I imagine if I tried to pull myself by my own bootstraps, well, I never have worn boots since I was like 8, but I'd probably fall on my face. But these kinds of quotes about like our hearts, following our hearts, what kind of attitude does that reflect? Being true to yourself. Yeah. These are kind of self-centered, isn't it? Yeah. What else? What is the most important thing? Your happiness. I also was thinking as I don't know if it'll show up here. There's a quote from a song many of you might know. For what is a man? What has he got? If not himself, then he has not to say the things that he truly feels and not the words of someone who kneels. Let the record show that I took all the blows and I did it my way. Frank Sinatra. Yeah. And there may be times where in some ways that some of that kind of is maybe somewhat admirable. But if you read through the whole song, it kind of it is pretty self-centered. But what does Jeremiah say about the heart? This is something I always try to remember. The heart is more deceitful than anything else, and incurable. Who can understand it? Now, again, I'm not really going to go, because I'm following a lesson plan, so I'm not going to go into places that I would normally go because I'm trying to follow through this. But I'm going to just divert for a second and step away from my notes and say, our hearts can be informed. But if we let our hearts do whatever they want, if we let our heart be our guide by itself, we will end up making a mess of our lives. If we guide our heart and listen to our heart. I mean, because what does your heart do? Like, let's say you see somebody on the side of the road who needs something. Does your heart pull at you? Then maybe you should listen to it. But your heart needs to be educated so that it can make good decisions. Anyway, that's not the lesson tonight. I just wanted to say that because it was in my head. So overt selfishness and egotism isn't the only way that we sometimes show our individualistic mindset. There's a more subtle but common way. A more subtle and common way is our overemphasis on self-reliance and our reluctance to submit ourselves to other people or groups. When was the last time that you asked a neighbor or a friend to borrow something like a tool, instead of going and buying one. And now, it's nice to be able to go and buy one, but I mean, usually that's what I do. Usually that's what I do. But I can say recently I actually have borrowed tools. I borrowed a tool from Larry. I've been trying to drill a hole in concrete, and my wireless drills just weren't cutting it. So I borrowed a drill. People had offered help. I didn't take all the help that I was offered because, well, first time Luke was sick and he was going to come help me. And then the next time Richard offered to help, but my kids were helping me. And so I said, hey, I'll just let them help me. And oftentimes I just like to, as a woodworker and like doing things, I kind of like to do things on my own. As an engineer, most of my engineering work happens inside my head. And I don't really involve people except for to say, oh, how do you want it? Okay, let me go do it. How should that look? Okay, let me go make that. But really, there's a lot of value in involving people in the things that we do. I mean, I've always had a hard time with this. Really, like I said, I oftentimes don't involve my children in my projects. And I'm trying to do a better job of that. This week, I'm making a new miter saw station, and 3 of my kids helped me put it together because I want them to see and work with me. I want them to see me working, and I want them to work with me. Floyd? Mm-hmm. But what Floyd was saying was that instead of deceitful, another word that might fit in there is blind spots. That we have many blind spots that affect the way we deal with things with our heart and whatnot. And so those blind spots may prevent us from seeing things as they really are. That's my summary of it.
Just kind of personally to you, I think it's wonderful that you're going to have your kids help you out. My fondest memories of my dad, he was a cabinet maker, and my fondest memories were going out and helping him install cabinets and helping build cabinets at home.
And so in that, let's just say for a minute, how do men, sorry women, but women, how do women build close relationships? With each other. Well, but how do women do that? They talk, right? How do men build relationships? They grunt. One of the best times I ever had with some brothers in Christ here was there was a time where I remember fixing someone's old garage that was falling apart and getting together and doing things. Like men, we build relationships by doing things, and that's in some ways like that's also that kind of relationship with our children and stuff. But when we do stuff together, it builds a relationship, doesn't it? In general, are you excited or irritated at the idea of being invited by others to join something, to do something new, get into a new group? Now, you can keep that one to yourself. And not all of us are the same. Now this is not a critique on our personalities, but we also have to take advantage of the opportunities that we have. Anyway, that's the beginning of this. In Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 through 9, let's get into this because I've taken 20 minutes and I haven't gotten very far. In the beginning, we start to see some conflicts. Genesis chapter 4, verse 1 through 9 says, Adam was intimate with his wife. She conceived and gave birth to Cain. She said, I have had a male child with the Lord's help. And she also gave birth to his brother Abel. Now Abel became a shepherd of flocks, but Cain worked the ground. In the course of time, Cain presented some of the land's produce as an offering to the Lord. And Abel also presented an offering, some of the firstborn of his flock and their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but he did not have regard for Cain and his offering. Cain was furious and he looked despondent. Then the Lord said to Cain, why are you furious? Why do you look despondent? If you do what is right, won't you be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out to the field. And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. And the Lord said to Cain, where is your brother Abel? I don't know, he replied. Am I my brother's guardian? I like that version, guardian. I don't know, it's very different. I mean, there's obviously more to the story than individualism here, but in but his response reflects a kind of disregard for his responsibility for others. Cain's question, am I my brother's keeper, assumes, at least the way he acts and speaks, it assumes the answer is no. Why would he make that assumption? Again, this is an open question. I don't even have an answer to this one. Why would he say, am I my brother's keeper?
Maybe he was jealous.
Was he jealous? He was jealous? Do we want to be responsible for others?
No.
He's covering up. There's that too. Yeah.
I think he answered that way because he knew what he had done, and he did not want to announce or to tell
Yeah.
what had happened. So it's like, why are you? It was almost
Yeah.
like, why are you even asking?
He didn't want to deal with the truth about it. Yeah. Yeah. And what responsibility do I have to my brother? Especially since he made me look bad. Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 29 says, just then an expert in the law stood up to test him. And this is never mind, I'll just read it. Just then an expert in the law stood up to test him, saying, Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? What is written in the law? He asked him. How do you read it? And he answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. You've answered correctly, he told him. Do this and you will live. But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, who is my neighbor? Oh, I killed my... Give me a second. I have to catch up to where I'm at. The lawyer asked a question which Jesus has him answer in return. That's a common thing of rabbis. Was someone asks a question and they answer the question by asking a question that the student has to answer. However, after answering it and being told, hey, you answered really well, good job, he asks another question to justify himself. In response to this, Jesus tells the story of the Good Samaritan. So, and Jesus does that to show, like, where people talk about or make you think about where you draw your lines of being a neighbor. So where do we draw our boundaries on being a neighbor? Anybody that comes in contact with you. I'm not that neighborly. It should be, yes. I did have. I used to say as a kid, when I would meet someone, I would say, "You're my friend," and there's no way that I'm going to change the fact that I'm your friend. I will always be your friend. I said that from about the time I was 12. I will always be your friend, even if you're not mine. And that's anyway. That's something that I've tried to do. But where do we draw the lines? Is there any lines that we draw? Where does the world draw their lines?
If they're doing something wrong,
Yeah.
really wrong,
It's yeah. It's kind of hard to want to be a neighbor of somebody who's not being not good, right? Do we like being around? Is there certain groups of people that we don't want to help? I mean, if you want to answer that question, you can. The answer to that question is probably for most of us, yes. There are people that I don't want to help, but I won't tell you who they are. That's true. You don't have to like someone to love them. At least the love of with the love of Christ, right? I mean, right. That doesn't mean that that everyone we deal with is going to be easy. Don't like what they do. And so, but these are two set. In a sense, we're talking about. We're not talking about whether we like them or not, but who are we going to be kind to? Who are we going to care for? Who are we going to pray for? Who are we not going to pray for? And pray for everybody. Yeah.
You know, if you've ever helped people out that really needed help that you really didn't know, who knows? You might have been helping an angel. I thought about that a lot.
And sometimes, and I'm just going to step into it. It's voting started yesterday. Sometimes we don't like those other people, right? Sometimes we say bad things about those other people who disagree with us. Sometimes we have bad attitudes and we're not very neighborly, especially when we get on Facebook and Twitter face or whatever you want to call it, Twitter book and Face Space. Those are dangerous places because we say things that are not neighborly. And it is not useful, and that is not beneficial, and that is not godly. We need to avoid that at all costs. If you can't say something nice, or if you can't write nothing nice, don't write nothing at all. Skip it. Anyway. So we need to make sure that we pay attention to that we don't draw our lines so narrow as to who we'll be neighborly to. Because Jesus is telling this guy who says, well, I've done all this stuff. I love God. I love my neighbor as myself. All right, I'm good. Jesus basically says, who's your neighbor? Are you willing to be a neighbor to your enemy? Are you willing to be a neighbor to somebody who you think is a heretic? Someone who you think is ungodly? Someone who you think is living a wrong lifestyle, who's worshiping God in wrong ways? Are you going to be a neighbor to them? And that's a hard answer for those people. And you need to ask yourself that question and think seriously. We all need to think seriously about these questions. Is there someone that I don't want to be a neighbor to? And not just say, well, surely I love everybody. I remember, I'm going to tell you a story, and this is not in my notes either, so I'm probably going to get off track and lose time. But I remember getting a message a while back about a friend in high school. I say a friend in high school. He wasn't a friend in high school. But he wasn't an enemy in high school. But I remember whenever it came up that he was really sick. And the first thought in my head was like, why would I pray for him? This wasn't very long ago, folks. This was like 2 years ago, maybe 3. And immediately after having that response in my head, I thought, what is wrong with you? What did this guy ever do to you? He really didn't ever do anything to me. I just never had a really good relationship with him at all. I never liked him. He never liked me. But he never really did anything to me. And there's no reason I should have that attitude. And I was telling you that story because I'm sure we all, I'm hoping I'm not the only one, that we all have stories like that. We need to make sure that we examine ourselves and see, is there someone that we're unwilling to be forgiving of? Anyone that we're unwilling to care for? Because that's who you need to care for. Right? You don't need to limit yourself to loving anybody. All right. So the true story, the thing that we really want to look at. So Cain didn't love his brother, and the Pharisee wanted to justify himself. And we're going to read a few passages, Joshua chapter 6 and 7. I'm just going to go through it real quick. Early on the seventh day, they're in the process of attacking Jericho. They started at dawn, marching around the city 7 times in the same way that they had the previous 6 days. That was the only day that they marched around the city 7 times. After the 7th time, the priest blew the trumpets, and Joshua and the people said to the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. But the city and everything in it are set apart to the Lord for destruction. Only Rahab the prostitute and everyone within her house will live, because she hid the men we sent. But keep yourselves from the things set apart, or you will be set apart for destruction. If you take any of these things, you will be set apart. If you take any of those things, you will set apart the camp of Israel for destruction, bring disaster on it. For all the silver and gold and all the articles of bronze and iron are dedicated to the Lord and must go into the Lord's treasury." Chapter 7. The Israelites, however, were unfaithful regarding the things set apart for destruction. Achan, son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerah of the tribe of Judah, took some of what was set apart, and the Lord's anger burned against the Israelites. Verse 11 of chapter 7. Israel has sinned. They have violated my covenant, and I appointed for them. They have taken some of what was set apart. They have stolen and deceived and put things with their own belongings. This is why the Israelites cannot stand against their enemies. They will turn their backs and run from their enemies because they have been set apart for destruction. And I will no longer be with you unless you remove from you what is set apart. So, how was it that the Israelites were able to defeat Jericho? They followed God. Now, if Joshua walked around the city by himself and shouted at the end, would they have succeeded? No. What did it take? It took the whole community obeying God for that to happen, because God was faithful to him. He gave them a command and they followed it, and it worked, right? It did exactly what God said. That is how they defeated Jericho. That's how the walls came down. So it wasn't by their own schemes or plans. It wasn't by like some great battle plan. It was because of God's plan, and they're working together for it. And then after that, there's a tragedy. The men, they lose in battle, and they're devastated. What has happened? Who precisely committed the sin that caused these people to die in the next battle? Well, but who sinned? Who specifically sinned? It was Achan. Achan sinned. And because of Achan's sin, and God told him, if any one of you does it, all of you are accountable. Does that seem fair? well, God did it, so it must be fair. Like but does it seem fair? Like if you were, if let's just say you're kids for a second, and there's Aiken over there, and you're somebody else. I don't know. I can't. Benny. There's Aiken, and you're Benny, and Achan did something. Should you get punished for it? It doesn't seem like it should be that way, right? But God told them, if you don't do it, you're all responsible. What do you think of that, Sean?
Well, it just gives me the impression that you all know that, therefore, you're responsible to not be negligent in making sure you all do everything you need to do. You work together, and if someone's not doing something, you all need to get in their business and make sure that something changes.
Yeah, we need to pay attention, don't we? We're responsible, and if we go back to the story of Cain and Abel, are you your brother's keeper? You are your brother's keeper. And think of it, and now it's not really in the same terms, but I wished that the word that Cain used was the same word that, like, when it talks about Abel was keeping sheep. It's not the same word. I really wish it was, because that would have been really cool. But in a sense, we're all to be shepherding each other, right? How do sheep really work? There's usually the old ones, and they all follow the old one in general, but then as a whole, they just kind of move along. But if we're guided by God and we start leading because we're following the shepherd, what's going to happen with the other sheep? They're going to follow. And so, am I my brother's keeper? I am. I may be a sheep. But as a sheep, even though I'm not a shepherd, by following God, people will follow. And that's just what happens.
You were asking what do we think about that. I believe that God, it's fair in Him holding us all to the same identical standard. So we all have a choice and an opportunity to obey and follow that. And going back to Cain and Abel and when they were together, you know, Cain was upset. Abel was upset. And when you think about it, he asked, well, what are you angry about? If you just did what I asked you to do, you wouldn't be upset. But he immediately, it was the state of his heart. You were asking about, what standard do we hold as far as like who we see as friends and whatnot. His heart wasn't in the right place, which led him to do what he had done. And the same thing is true, that it could have gone in a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
Just simply
Oh, yeah.
offered a sacrifice in the manner that God was requiring him to, but that fell back on him. So when it comes to, on a broader scale, as you asked, when it comes to why, if we don't like people, if there is a certain, if there is whatever, we have to ask ourselves, why, what is the problem that I have? Like, is the problem really with what God has asked us to do? Or is the problem with our heart as it's regarding this person,
Yeah.
this type of person, this group of people? Because that's where the sin comes in. And so I find it interesting that he didn't answer God, at least, not that it was noted, but he was so angry that he immediately asked his brother, hey, let's go.
Yeah.
But his intent was, let me get you away, because my intent, I'm so angry, I'm going to murder you. And that's what he did. But he still had a choice in the process to just either he could follow what God asked him to do or not. And that's the same choice that we have today.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the real important question is, why do we feel the way we do?
Yeah.
It's in opposition to what God has.
And we really just need to examine ourselves and not just go with the easy answers and really dig deep into what our heart, like, what, if I'm angry, why am I angry? Really need to understand that. Because there's times to be angry, isn't there? There are times to be angry. If there's people being abused, it's right to be angry. If there's people being mistreated, it's time to be angry. But there's lots of times that we get angry and it's just about me and what I like. Now, what I really do, I don't have time to talk about it, but I really do appreciate there's a kind of an instant, it seems almost like God is talking to Cain, and Cain's like, yeah, whatever, I'm going to go kill my brother right now. Like, that's almost like, it seems like it's that quick. Like, it's like he's in the midst of temptation, and he's like, no, I want to end this now. I don't want to have to fight my brother for this anymore. But we really need to examine ourselves and pay attention to what it is that's leading our hearts, what's guiding our hearts, what's pulling us. We talked about last week, if we have our minds set on things of earth, where's our heart going to be pulled? It's going to be pulled towards earth. But if we have our eyes on things above, if we have our treasure above, where's our heart going to be pulled? It's going to be pulled above. So that's what guides our heart. So then, in a sense, you can trust your heart if you've trained it well, right? Moving on. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 19. Therefore, brothers, since we have boldness to enter the sanctuary through the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way he has opened for us through the curtain, that is his flesh. And since we have a great high priest over the house of God, let us draw near with a true heart and full assurance of faith, our hearts sprinkled clean from the evil consciences of our... Oh, man, I got ahead of myself. Let's see. Bodies washed in pure water. Let us hold to the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. Let us be concerned about one another in order to promote love and good works, and stay away from not staying away from our worship meetings, as some... I'm moving my eyes, sorry. As some have habitually done. But encourage each other, all the more as you see the day drawing near. According to verse 25, what is the purpose of the church gathering together? Or at least one of the purposes. What is one of the purposes of us gathering together? Worship. To worship? Encourage. And that, how much of our worship, and let's just stop for a second. We're not going to talk about like how we worship. We're going to say like how much of what we do when we worship can we do by ourselves? How can you sing by yourself? Yeah. Can you pray by yourself? Yeah. Can you read God's word? And have you ever driven down the road and preached to yourself? I've done it. There's times where I've gotten really excited and I'm like preaching to the air in my car,
The Bible tells you to take some time with this thing, God.
Yeah, so meditating. And those are valuable things. We can do almost everything we do in worship by ourselves. But do you always get the same kind of, is it the same as when we're together? How much did you miss it when we were not here during COVID? It's really hard, wasn't it? This is where we're supposed to be together. So part of the purpose of us coming together is not just worship, but part of worshiping together naturally ends up encouraging. And then we also get to talk to each other and have conversations and fellowship with one another. And part of our fellowship is that worship. I'm not going to go into this, but think about ways in which does our assembly accomplish this? Just think about it. Are there ways that it falls short? Just think about it. Well, you can address that with one another. We can talk about that. I think it's interesting that verse 23 talks about confessing our faith and concerning ourselves with one another. And then we're talking about Genesis chapter 4, and he didn't want to confess either any kind of faith or his sin. And he also wasn't concerned with his brother. And that's not who we're to be. We are to be concerned for one another because we want to. How many of the people in this room do you want to see in heaven? Everyone, right? And even more than in this room. And so we do that by working together. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 12 through 26. For the body is one and has many parts. And all the parts of the body, though there are many, are one body. So also is Christ. For we were all baptized by one Spirit into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, whether slave or free, and we are all made to drink one Spirit. So the body is not one part, but many. If the foot says, because I am not a hand, I don't belong in the body, in spite of this, it still belongs in the body. And if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong in the body, in spite of this, it still belongs to the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But now God has placed each one of the parts in one body just as he wanted. And if they were all the same part, where would the body be? Now there are many parts, yet one body. So the eye cannot say to the hand, I do not need you. Or again, the head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you. But even more, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are necessary. And those parts of the body we think to be less honorable, we clothe these with great honor. And our unpresentable parts we have, so that our unpresentable parts will have a better presentation. But our presentable parts have no need for clothing. Instead, God has put the body together, giving great honor to the less honorable, so that there would be no division in the body, but that the members would have the same concern for each other. So if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. If one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. What encouragement does this passage offer?
It should encourage each one of us to reach to the other one.
We should reach to the others, to one another, yeah?
Build each other up.
Build each other up.
We're used to thinking about ourselves belonging to the Lord. We are his slaves. We're his possession. We don't think as much of ourselves as belonging to the body. That's what that scripture said. That body part thinks it's not a part, but it belongs
To the body.
If God loves the church and he wants us to love each other as ourselves, there's a mutuality there. I mean, you can't be ignored. You belong to the body. I mean, you belong in the body, but you belong
You
to
belong in the body and you belong to the body. And the body is not a body without you. Right? Which part of the body is less necessary? According to what Paul says, there is not one part of the body that is less valuable than any other. We all have our different places. We all have our different roles. We all have different talents and skills. We all have our different, we all have our different experiences. We all bring something different to this body. And if we keep that to ourselves, it's going to be hard for us to grow. One of the greatest things of all, and I really don't have time to go into this either, but if something goes wrong in your life and you never share it with anybody, but God does something amazing in that, and you never tell anybody, how sad is that?
Very sad.
We need to hear and know the good things that God does in our tragic lives. We need to share, because everybody has to deal with something that's not good. Everybody has to deal with something that's not good. There's things that happen in life that are horrible. And if we don't share the horror of our lives, the terror, the sadness, the sorrow, the brokenness of our lives, we cannot share in the glory of God. And so many times, and this is a soapbox of mine, so many times we want to hide our pain. People, if you hide your pain again, we cannot help comfort you and be those hands and feet that God has made us to be, the shoulders that God has made us to be. We need to share in our pain. Share our pain. Not just, we've got to give our pain to one another so that we can be God's hands and feet and shoulders to wrap each other up, to hug each other, to help each other walk in this life. God's glory is made manifest through his people. soapbox. So the encouragement in this is that we're all valuable. Every single one of us. There's a Larry's a mouth for us, right? He's the preacher. He's the spokesman in a sense for the church, right? You're the appendix. Well, you know what? The appendix is needed. You don't cut it out. If you cut it out, you'll probably have some problems somewhere else. God made it for a reason. That may be funny, but it's also true. But every part has value. Every single part. If you ever feel like, well, what do I do? What part do I play? You may never know exactly what part you play. But just keep playing your part. Don't give up. Use your skills. And if you need to, talk to other people. Ask them, what is my skill? What am I good at? What do I bring to the church because a lot of people, there's lots of times people don't know. If you ask, you'll find out. Okay. I'm going to skip ahead because if you want to read Ephesians chapter 4, it talks about how God has given us all different gifts. So basically just said all that. But Ephesians chapter 4, verse 7 through 16. But I want to go to Acts chapter 2 because we see what we're really talking about here, the kind of community that we're talking about in Acts chapter 2. So those who accepted his message were baptized, and that day 3,000 people were added to them. And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teachings, to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to the prayers. Then fear came on everyone, and many wonders and signs were being performed through the apostles. Now all the believers were together and held all things in common, and sold their possessions and property, and distributed the proceeds to all, as anyone had need. Every day they devoted themselves to meeting together in the temple complex. They broke bread from house to house. They ate their food with joyful and humble attitude, praising God and having favor with all the people. And every day the Lord added to them those who were being saved. Acts chapter 4, verse 32 and 37 through 37 says, Now a large group of those who believed were of one heart and mind, and no one said that any of his possessions was his own, but instead they held everything in common. And the apostles were giving testimony with great power to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and great grace was on all of them. For there was not a needy person among them, because all who owned land and houses sold them and brought the proceeds of the things that were sold and laid them at the apostles' feet. This was then distributed for each person's basic needs. Joseph the Levite, I'll just stop there, but you get the point. Last week I talked about this, and one of my biggest things when it comes to politics now, I really don't, I get to where I don't care. I care about what I do, what we do together. Where am I going to have the most impact? Right here. The people that I know, the people that I meet, the people that I talk to, and the people that I know, how I can help you and how we can help each other, help the people around us know Jesus. And that's going to change our world more than who gets into an office in someplace else. What's going to help us more than anything is serving God, being a light to those around us, to each other. We need to shine light to each other and help each other walk this way together. Why? Why do we need to do all this together? John chapter 13 says, I give you a new command. Love one another just as I have loved you. You must also love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. How great must our love be for one another if it just stands out? Is it just going to be a common love? Is it just going to be a common love? Just like anybody's family? What is it going to look like? We're going to take care of each other. People, we need to take care of each other. If you have needs, you need to share them. We don't want to be burdens. I know nobody wants to be a burden. but we've got to share our burdens. Because that's why we're a church. The church is not a single person. It's a whole body of people.
More than just asking somebody about your gifts and things like that, they do have surveys out there that can help you learn about your gifts. And I would suggest that you try to find out how to get a hold of one of those, because those are very enlightening to me, because I didn't know what my gift was. I was in my 30s before I knew what my gift was. And I think people need to do more than just ask or to say, well, your gift is this, your gift is that. You need to find out for yourself and get one of those surveys, questionnaires, to help you understand yourself.
Yeah. What Valerie said was basically, there's ways to find out what you're good at besides just asking. Some people, it's pretty easy for others to tell you what you're good at, but you may need help, and so you can find places like that. Maybe if you know of a specific website or something that will help you do that, let me know and I'll share it. So keep these things in your mind. How does this change what you think, what you do? When you're living your life, if you feel like, well, I can do it by myself, but I don't have to, take that opportunity to call somebody, get somebody involved. Many people have problems and deal with depression or different kinds of things that they struggle with in their heart and in their mind. If you don't talk about it, if you don't share it, if you don't let people help you, you're going to keep going down that path. We can help each other walk hand in hand to heaven. And we don't need to do it alone. God gave us a body to walk together. So let's think about what it means for you, what changes for you, who you need to be to live in this community. Now, some of us I'm done, but some of us are really reserved people. And sometimes being in an environment with lots of people is stressful. That doesn't mean you have to be around people all the time. I'm just saying, you can still be yourself, but we still have to be together some. We still need to help each other. We still need to be there for each other. Okay, next week. You are free to do anything so long as it doesn't hurt others. That's the false story. Everything is permissible. That's a false story from the Bible. And we'll talk about that too, because that's something we often use. Everything's permissible. Is it really? No. The true story from Scripture, not everything is beneficial. Scripture, sacrificing your rights for others without judging their faith. Those are the true stories that we're going to talk about. All right. Thank you very much.